All right, let's jump right into a really fascinating and honestly kind of backwards idea. We all spend our lives trying to get rid of our problems, but what if science and history actually tell us that a life without any problems, well, that's the biggest problem of all. Let's get into it.
Seriously, just take a second and actually picture that. You wake up one morning and poof, every problem, big or small, is just gone. What would that life really, truly feel like?
I mean, it sounds like the dream, right? Total paradise. A life with zero stress, zero pain, zero worries. Nothing to bother you, nothing to challenge you. It's what we all think we want. But is that paradise really what it's cracked up to be?
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at why this idea of a problem-free paradise is so tempting. Then, we'll dig into history and find what really drives us forward. After that, we'll dive into the brain itself, see what happens when it's unstimulated, and explore what happens when the mind turns on itself. And finally, we'll talk about the power of choosing your own challenges.
Okay, so let's start with this idea we're all sold on, this utopian dream of a life completely, totally free from any struggle.
And boom, right away we hit the core paradox of this whole thing. This quote just nails it. The big idea here is that a total lack of external problems doesn't bring you peace. It just creates this vacuum. And as we're about to see, the human mind absolutely cannot stand a vacuum.
To really get this, we've got to zoom way out. I mean, let's look at the huge story of human history and figure out what has always, consistently, pushed us to be better.
What's so wild about this is how it completely reframes history's biggest tragedies. Think about it. Widespread famine wasn't just a disaster. It forced us to invent agriculture. Horrific pandemics made us discover an entire invisible world of germs. And the absolute horrors of war, they pushed medicine forward at an incredible pace. Our greatest steps forward as a species were born from our absolute worst moments.
And this brings us to this really powerful concept. Problems aren't a bug in the human operating system, they are the operating system. They're this biological engine of change, the hidden code that has forced us to learn, adapt, and evolve for thousands and thousands of years. Without problems, we just stop, we stagnate.
And this just says it all, doesn't it? I mean, really think about it. Can you name one great invention, one masterpiece, one huge leap for society that came from a place where everyone was just comfortable and content? Nope. Progress requires pressure. It demands a problem that just has to be solved.
Okay, so that's the big picture of humanity. But what's really amazing is that this exact same principle is playing out on a much, much smaller scale, right inside your own skull.
So here's the thing you absolutely have to understand. Your brain is a problem-solving machine. That's its job description. It evolved over millions of years, not to be relaxed and calm, but to overcome stuff, to navigate dangers, to work towards goals. If you take away its problems, you're basically taking away its entire reason to exist.
Now, we all hear about dopamine, right? We call it the pleasure chemical. But that's a huge misunderstanding. It's actually the motivation chemical. It's the juice your brain releases not when you achieve the goal, but when you're on the way to the goal. It's the little voice that says, yes, keep going, this is working. So if there's no goal, no problem to solve, that whole dopamine system just goes dark.
And what happens when that motivation engine just shuts off? Well, it's a pretty predictable slide. At first, you feel peace. No more stress. But then, that peace gets replaced by this weird, pervasive silence inside, a lack of drive. And that silence, if it goes on long enough, turns into this deep, profound feeling of emptiness.
And from a biological point of view, this makes total sense. For any living thing, a state of absolute stability, no challenges, no need to adapt, is basically a death sentence. To not be moving towards something is, in evolutionary terms, stagnation. It's a state that our very biology is programmed to see as a crisis.
So what happens if the brain needs a problem to solve, but it can't find one out in the real world? This is where things get really dangerous. It starts a war with the only opponent it has left, you. Just look at the difference here. Real problems, like I need to find a job, they're external, they're tangible. You can solve them by doing things. But the problems the brain invents for itself, they're internal, intangible. They're born from thought, and you can't solve them with more thought. It's like replaying an awkward conversation over and over in your head. You're just stuck in a loop with no way out.
And get this. This is probably the most critical piece of the whole puzzle. Your brain makes absolutely no distinction between a real threat and an imagined one.
The exact same fear centers light up. The exact same stress hormones flood your body. You feel the exact same suffering for a problem that exists only inside your head.
And this is what that suffering feels like. It's that anxiety that comes out of nowhere, those fears that have no real cause, that nagging guilt about something tiny, or just that constant draining feeling of I'm not enough. Your brain, desperate for a dragon to slay, starts turning tiny little things, a weird look from someone, a word you said, into these huge internal monsters. And honestly, they often hurt more than real problems because there's no clear way to fight them.
Okay, I know this all sounds pretty bleak, right? But here's the amazing part. Just understanding how this system works is the key to taking back control. So how do we use all this to our advantage?
The first and most important step is to completely reframe how you think about problems. We're taught to see them as a sign that we failed, that something's wrong with our lives. But that's not it at all. We need to start seeing them for what they are. They are proof that you are engaged with the world. They are the evidence that you are striving, you are moving, you are trying. They're proof that you're alive.
So let's just quickly wrap up the big ideas here. First, problems are the engine of growth, period, for our species and for you as an individual. Second, if your brain doesn't have a challenge, it will either shut down your motivation or it will start creating its own pain. Third, and this one is so important, that invented suffering often feels worse because it's unsolvable. And all of that leads to the biggest takeaway. The goal is not a problem-free life.
This is the secret. This is the whole thing right here. The goal isn't to get rid of challenges. The goal is to consciously choose them. It's about finding the right problems, the ones that mean something to you, the ones that make you grow and learn and become better, instead of the pointless ones your brain invents that just drag you down.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. Because you're going to have problems one way or another. That's just how we're built. They're either going to be real ones that you choose or invented ones that your mind creates for you. So the most important question you can ever ask yourself is this: what problem are you choosing to grow from?